So in John 2, I understand the meaning of the water pots being filled to the brim.
Yes.
And I know the Jewish tradition of purified water for their ceremonial washing that didn't purify them really. I understand Jesus saying it wasn't yet time for his miracles, but still changed the ceremonial water into wine. My couple questions are, why did Jesus say to dip some in the cup for the master of ceremonies to taste? Would he not believe in the miracle if he saw it? And would this wine be considered new wine, meaning not fermented? And last question, was the 6 pots representing the number of man? Why 6? And I do understand why Jesus chose servants to see his miracles.
Well, what's really interesting, the guests said most people bring out the inferior wine at first. When everyone is well drunk, then they bring out the inferior wine. They bring out the best first, and then when everybody's drunk, then they bring out the inferior. But you have saved the best for last. They brought out the best at the very last. I would have to say, based upon what the crowd said, it was probably fermented. Now, my take on this is very, very interesting because I believe that as we study the book of John, all things were made by him, speaking of Jesus Christ. Without him, not anything that's made is made. Here we find Jesus takes something new, water, and makes it appear to be aged, fermented, and given to the guests. I believe when God made this earth, I believe the first miracle that God did for anywhere was he created the heavens and the earth. And I believe that he created this earth fully mature, fully aged. People say, well, what about, all these different carbon dating things and all these. I believe God created the earth fully aged. I believe the first miracle that Jesus did is he made something new appear to be old. I don't think that's hard for God. I've listened to a lot of commentary on whether the wine was fermented or not fermented. The point is that Jesus changed something from one thing to something else. Kind of what he does with all of us as well. Now, it is interesting that 6 does appear there, and we have basically a 6,000-year creation that God made going back to the book of Genesis. The 7th year, the 7,000th year, will be the millennial reign of Christ. So I look at this as kind of an interesting picture that for 6,000 years, Jesus created something new, made it appear to be aged. The first miracle Jesus did on earth was he made something new appear to be old. And that number 6 appears as well. Your thoughts, John?
Well, I think, there's a lot of speculation that we could make on what this means, what that means. How about that? And I think it's interesting to look at it from that perspective. One of the questions that was asked is why the master of the feast was given the first sip, probably because he was the master of the feast. It must have been some position that he held that he was given the first sip of the new wine that Jesus brought out. It is also worth noting that the word that is used there for wine is the same word that's used in Ephesians, where Paul says, do not be drunk with wine. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 18, it's the same Greek word. I think it's oinos, and it's so I don't think it was grape juice, as some people say. But I think that what I take away from this, a couple of things. One is that I love looking at the servant part of it. Like the servants are asked to do something, and they're filling them up with water, and then they have to believe that they're going to take this out, and they just filled these water pots up with water, thinking that it's going to be wine. They got to see something. And I think that the thing that's exciting to me is they were obedient to what Jesus told them to do. And because they were obedient to what Jesus told them to do, they got to see a miracle that the other people didn't get to see. The other thing I think that's worth noting about this particular miracle is John tells us that this was the beginning of the signs that Jesus did in Galilee and manifested his glory. And John said his disciples believed in him. So this was a significant miracle, like the first one that Jesus did, to where the disciples, they believed, they saw what had happened. So John saw fit to highlight it, where the other gospels did not highlight it. John points it out, and it was a significant moment. And as Jesus brought joy into that wedding feast.